Welcome to Whachacha's Tabletop World, the channel devoted to the love of board gaming. My name is Sweetness Whachacha, and today, these are my thoughts on Mythwind. If you want to see an overview of the game, click on the link down below. Okay, so I said my thoughts, but really these are, as in the title that you've seen, my first impressions. Okay, so why do a first impression video? Why not just do a full review? Well, because this is a very lengthy game. It's going to take a very long time, I think, to kind of chew through it. And there's a lot to this game. There's a lot of things I thought about in my head before I really even read the rule book, or as I started reading the rule book. I had all these thoughts and things about it. It's a really unique, very interesting game. Now, I don't really have my thumb on the pulse of board gaming like I used to, the news and stuff and the games coming out. So I was in my local game shop and I just saw it sitting there and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. It was brand new, so I picked it up. And because it looked very compelling. Now, right off the bat, it's very interesting that this is not a game that is, now it's cooperative, but it's not, there's no lose condition in this game, which is a really interesting idea. Like, is it really even a game? You know, I mean, that's one of the parameters that make a game, I believe, is the fact that there is a win or a loss condition, whether you're playing, you know, multiple players again competing against each other, or whether the players are teaming up cooperatively against the game system itself. So that's kind of interesting. Now, a parallel recently, phenomenal game, Dorfromantic and Dorfromantic Sakura, I believe. Yeah, Sakura. Those were games that you couldn't lose either. However, they are kind of point-based, like you're trying to attain a high score. And that's nothing new. We've seen a lot of games like that, you know, video games and things like that over the years. You know, when you go to play the arcade and things, you know, that's a pretty common thing. You're competing against yourself, competing against a high score. Even Uwe Rosenberg has games, you know, you play solo or some things where you're trying to attain a higher and higher score, and your competition is your previous score or some arbitrary number that's been set for you to beat, depending on the level. So that's kind of interesting on its own. And, you know, I think about this is interesting to me because I believe that there's way more popular hobby than ours is the video game industry, and there's probably thousands of games that there is no real loss for, right? Like you're just kind of playing through for the joy of playing. You're like these farming sims, or like these kind of games where they're just kind of like these nice little games, you know, where you're just going around and doing things. You know, there's no like, you can take as long as you want, you can take as short as you want, and there's no really winning and losing. Sometimes you can complete the game, you can complete the events. Now, this game does say that you can kind of complete, they said there's a natural, they put it like this, there's a natural end point for players to stop playing. However, they can keep going if they wish. And that's kind of a cool thing, I think. Oftentimes people levy against these kind of games, the idea that like, oh, you can only play through it one time. Even though, I mean, this is an old argument, it's kind of ridiculous to me, the idea that like, it's like, you know, most games you're not going to play 20 times. If you play a legacy game 20 times, that's the end of it. I kind of like that, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of cool to polish up a game myself, but this kind of, I think, caters to both crowds, which is a pretty interesting thing. Now, another kind of obvious parallel, because this is a very unique game, and that's again why I'm kind of doing this first impressions thing, because, you know, this idea that you know, there's a Euro game in kind of the space that you would find a different style of game. So Charterstone being this like legacy game that continued, and it was a Euro game. It's a worker placement, you're building buildings, and this has worker placement as well, which is one of my favorite mechanisms. It might even be my favorite mechanism. I really love it. And I love the idea of building buildings. You're deciding what goes into the town. There's only so many slots in the town at this point. I've just started the game. So, you know, I don't know if you'll have an opportunity to have more space, but it's really interesting to me that they have that in there, that like you have to, you know, decide what is going to go into the town, how you'd like to build out the town, and then what spaces you like to put there. It's kind of like the idea of, you know, putting your own dice face on the dice. They, you know, I think as players, you know, we really love the idea of being able to kind of customize our own experience in a lot of games. And you see that, like I say, in the dice building, card building now, these kind of ones where you put different transparencies to build your own cards. We really like that. And I think that comes a little bit in here now. Now, extending that idea a little bit, you know, I remember doing a review with a friend of mine on his channel about the game Endangered, and I remember describing that game as a very modern board game. And what I meant by that, and at the time, was it was just sort of, I mean, the line between Eurogame and Ameritrash is completely dissolved now, right? There's no real delineation anymore. The games there's a ton of things in there. And this one really has that as well. I feel like it really feels that way because it feels like they just took pieces of all these other kind of styles of games. You get the worker placement, very classic. You have a story kind of happening, right? You're playing through this story. There's some envelopes to be opened. I don't know what's in them. I'm not, like what extra buildings or what extra concepts are going to kind of come out over the course of this adventure. The board itself looks a bit like Sleeping Gods to me, like the way it's kind of organized and a little bit of a story element to it, just the art-wise. I mean, like it looks like that books and things. So it has a bit of that story. You're kind of like in this valley and there's these sprites and you're building a town here. You've got villagers and sprites. And so when you look at these different areas, like these have effects that you'll get, when you turn them over. Now, that's not really the story part of it, but I think that kind of is a little bit of evocative of that kind of a game. Then you're going to get, the fact that like there's this save system. You have these trays and it has a whole save system. Like this will hold all of your pieces in there where they were, and then inside of here you're going to get like the other stuff that's gonna be like a save system, and that's really a unique facet as well to this game, and that's very kind of reminding me of a little bit of like Seventh Continent, and I have Seventh Sentinel. I haven't cracked it open yet, but that idea of like this is an immense long game, and so you have to have some way to save it easily so that you can kind of pick it up and continue, because that's another barrier to play a game. Of course, it's just like, oh, I'd love to play that tonight. It's gonna take too long to set it up and then play and then break it down, and this is like sort of using a bit of that and a little bit of the modern day gaming like contain like we have this whole obsession now with inserts, right? Like board gamers love inserts, and you love to put all that stuff in there and make it organized. And this is kind of like these functional inserts that kind of that to me, like I always just throw everything in the box, like because I want it to be quick to get it in there and get it out of there. But to me, like the only good insert in my mind is an insert that speeds up the setup process, and this like it does immensely, which is amazing. That's another kind of cool thing. I mean, I didn't even touch on the components in this game. There's just so much to talk about. But the art in it is lovely. I mean, you get these huge miniatures, for each of the characters, and that seems completely unnecessary, but it goes along with what I said about this kind of modern board game, right? Like, I mean, because people love miniatures, they're like, throw them in there. I feel like it's like, there's a line in, Big Trouble in China, he's talking about the Chinese and how they kind of pick what they like and in terms of their ideology and stuff. And he's like, it's like a buffet. You just take what you want and you leave the rest. And I think that it seems like these designers really just did that. They were like, hey, Seventh Continent, you got this cool little system here where you could just save everything because it's a super long story game. Let's take the saving thing. Oh, people love inserts now. Let's do that. Hey, people are loving Sleeping Gods with these little like mini stories and stuff. Let's take that. People love, the Euro game style. Let's do that. You want a variety with all these characters. I mean, again, like you can switch characters at the end of every season. So you can play completely differently, and they're all rated on complexity. Of course, if you play a 4-player game, you're going to play that same thing, and you can trade with your teammates or whatever and play different roles or whatever. But that's giving you that sort of alternate roles in a cooperative game. And each of them have like a mini game. They have a whole different thing they're doing, and so that's very interesting as well. And it reminds me a bit about like speaking of these modern board games and taking the buffet analogy that we're using here. They're taking stuff from Massive Darkness 2, and then the second. There's like another sequel to it, something about like hell something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but each of those characters have has their own mini game. And the same thing with Space Cadets, the original, not the Dice Tool version. Everybody's got their own sort of thing, and you don't have to learn everybody's stuff. You can learn just your stuff, and then you're doing that. Of course, you have to touch in with your teammates. It reminds me a little bit about like Orleans Invasion, which is one of my favorite games, period. And the idea of like when you play that, you kind of like you make a you talk to your buddy or your players, your teammates, and you say, this is what I think we should do for our goals and stuff, and this is what I'm going to kind of do. And then you play on your own for a while. You check in, you make sure, okay, we're all done. Okay, time for the next turn. And then you play the next turn, right? And then every now and again, you got to check in and say, okay, hold on a second. Just, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm thinking about doing that. And it's maybe one of the best ways to get around the idea of that quarterbacking. Now, I personally generally prefer really a lot of communication, tight turns, like, oh, if I do this and you really discussing things quite a bit. I think the cooperative. I really love the planning and the teamwork in that kind of a game. But this kind of has a little bit of that, like a nice balance of it, I think, because you will check in with your teammates, but you are part of a community, but your own person. It feels like a post-apocalyptic movie or something, you know, like I think like The Stand, like the book and stuff, where it's like, I remember there's this scene where they all kind of get together. They're trying to get the power back on and stuff. I mean, everything's going crazy, and they're like, somebody comes up and says, hey, what's your report on the power? Well, I think we should have power restored by this point. I need this and this and this. And then somebody else comes up and says, hey, I'm doing the crops. Everybody's kind of got their own job, but they're all part of this whole. And I think that in the theme of this comes through like really, really well in the gameplay. I think it's really, really interesting. Speaking of other, you know, buffet pieces that they've taken from other games, you've also got a bit of that Crossroads system. I mean, I know there's been in a lot of different games this kind of idea, but they have that that bit like you found in Dead of Winter, where it's like you read the card, what do we want to do? You know, you've got a choice. You can't see what will happen, but you know there's, you know, choices on both things. So on either choice you make, right? Like, so there's going to be a differing outcome. And I think that's very, very interesting. You've got the goals to go for per season. That's really cool. There's the adventure thing. That reminds me a little bit of Caverna as well. You know, like this idea of like a Euro game, but you can also go adventuring and get different things. Like, so it has like, I mean, it gives that sense of like that feeling a little bit like that Sleeping Gods thing I talked about, where you're kind of like, you're building a town, you're doing this Euro game type of thing of like building out the buildings and doing like, you know, you got the mill and you've got the lumber yard, all these kind of standard things, but you're also in a wild place. And I think that's really, really fascinating. I also love this like building tree they have here, like which shows you like the dependencies. I remember even like talking about video games a little bit. I remember like StarCraft and Warcraft, the originals, like it's kind of dating myself, but like, you know, back in the late 90s, you'd have like you had to get buildings for other dependencies. And of course, you know, there's a lot of board games that use that as well. Obviously, like the tech trees and stuff. I love Kemet comes to mind. I mean, like I keep going about this thing of like this modern board game and this kind of buffet idea of like taking all these really cool things. I really love that. And it doesn't seem like as strong in this game, like but you are replacing some of these buildings and upgrading them. And I think that's kind of an interesting path, you know, just one part of it. So as far as like brand new kinds of things in this game, you know, they have this interesting concept of like alignment. So when you take an action, you are going to be either aligned with the sprites or the villagers. So far, that hasn't really made a difference in the story for me or in the gameplay, but it has made a little bit of a difference in the planning. I mean, because I'm like thinking like, if I take that action, I can't, you know, I just have to shuffle things around. And, you know, so that's a little bit of a new thing, I think, which is kind of interesting. But what's weird, like, is because shuffling the actions are, okay, I'll do that next turn. Oh, but, you know, how's the efficiency going to work? And that's a weird part of this game because, like, there's no efficiency. Like, there's no winning or losing. So, I mean, it's kind of weird because, but I think, and this is kind of a weird thing, and maybe this is just a personal thing, but, you know, I play thousands of board games, and I think at this point, like, I've been trained to always play in a certain way. Like, I'm always going to play in a way that says, hey, I must play efficiently. As if, you know, there is a reason to do so, right? Because I have to win the game. I got to do well. And I think that's just so ingrained in me that, like, it's like those are like guide rails, invisible guide rails. So I feel like I'm still playing to play efficiency and well, even though like it doesn't seem to really matter. I don't know. We'll see whether any of that kind of changes over the course of the game. I do like this season thing as well. I'm really enjoying that. I think it's just you get different bonuses on your character depending on like the season. Weather effects change for the season, which is thematic and kind of interesting. I don't think it's a major thing. I don't think anything in this game is like a major thing. I think each part of it is like something just to add a little bit to your gumbo or whatever. I'm really getting crazy with the metaphors here, but I mean, I like it. Rains a whole lot. You're going to lose some food. Okay, that's in the spring. Okay, well, like that's kind of cool. Maybe the crops get washed away. I'm guessing like in the winter, maybe you get some kind of detriment from, you know, like having to burn wood or something. And that's another thing. When you go through, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but like you're going through the events and stuff, like it reminds me of the Robinson Crusoe. During my playthrough, I kind of thought of that. And I'm like, like there's these events when you make a choice and you shuffle cards in, and it reminds me of that kind of thing in Robinson Crusoe, where it's like, you're like, I'm going to go check over here and hunt a tiger or whatever. Or you do something, and then like you looked in there, and now a tiger gets shuffled into the deck, and you're like, well, you went over there into that forest, and you made that tiger aware of your presence, and now he might come back, and maybe not, maybe he won't. So I think that has a little bit of that too. Whereas it's not necessarily a legacy style, but it does have like those campaign elements where maybe you do have something happening, that is a result of an action or a decision that you made. Again, this is just first impressions. I don't know how far that's going to go. I don't know how much different one group's playthrough is going to be to another playthrough. I think this is going to appeal to people though too that don't like that. There's people that love playing Euro games, but they don't really like the in-your-face ones. They like the kind of like, I'm playing my solitaire game and you're doing yours. And this is kind of like in that same wheelhouse of that, like of Dwarf Romantic, of all these kind of games where, they're super popular, like I said, in the video game world. And so it's kind of cool here to see that that extended, right? And now I'm just looking at the board as I'm talking here. I like the building thing too. There's a construction queue, you say, I'm going to build this building, and normally you just put it on the board. But this is such a neat thing that like, you put it in like how long it takes to build the thing. It goes from 1 to 4, and those buildings are going to, like, as time progresses, they're going to get closer and closer. You don't just build the building and use it immediately. It's like, okay, well, we've got that started. What do you think? A week you'll be done with that? And the workers are like, yeah, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, who knows? Because you don't really know. You have no idea. Like, you're going to get these event cards. Maybe it comes out right away, maybe it doesn't. And that's kind of, I think, like a neat thing. It gives it more of a feel of like, I guess it's against that efficiency thing, and as a gamer, I almost hate that, because playing like a really tight Euro game, you don't want to just be like, oh well, who knows when that building that I just paid for is going to come out. It's Ora Labora, whatever. We'll see. Whenever that building comes out, it'll be fine. No, you're like, I need that building right now because it's important for my strategy. But I think it really serves the story and a bit of realism, and the theme of the game, I think, is really strong in it. So really, what a fantastic, just before you get to the game, just all this stuff really coming from just reading the rules and stuff, and observing the game. So this is one of the most excited I've been to try a game ever, I think. Maybe, well, that's not true. I should say in a very long while. I've gotten a little bit jaded, maybe jaded is not the right word, but you've gotten used to games and things. I remember like Pandemic Legacy being announced and being like, whoa, that was amazing to me. And there's been games over the years that have really, got me very excited. This game, it's the first one in probably years that I've gotten like super, super excited for. So, and now, what does the gameplay feel like though? I've talked about all this stuff around the game and the design and stuff. Well, what's the gameplay like? So, in the beginning, you're just kind of getting used to moving around and building things, and a lot of stuff is out of your price range, and it's hard to see in the beginning. Like, I'm like, 20 coins for this? Yeah, right. That's forever away. It costs like, you got to buy the workers, you got to buy, stuff, and then like you got to turn that over to make other stuff, and you're making a very small profit. But as you sort of start to play and get used to the game itself, it's kind of a nice little tutorial, because they can kind of like, and I love that too, by the way. I love the style of games like, like Magic Maze has that, where you play little scenarios, and they're fun on their own, and then they kind of keep adding rules as you get more comfortable with the system. The system is getting more complex, and then you're just able to enjoy the game for much longer. It's sort of like this built-in expansion, and that's kind of what you see here as well, where like you get used to the general play of the game. And I'm kind of felt like I was going to be a little bit like I'm like, come on, let's go, and as I'm you start to kind of get a taste of the world and get used to it. It does seem like there's always kind of something you can do, and because there isn't that huge pressure, I think that's part of the game, is that you're kind of like, you're sort of going with the flow a bit. So I don't think this is the kind of game that generally appeals to me in my wheelhouse, because I like much tighter games. I like much more, I like a much more efficient, building the efficiency engines, making the most out of my actions. But, for this, I feel like I'm along for the ride. I've only just scratched the surface of this game, but it seems so absolutely fascinating to me. Now, I mentioned before a few different games, I keep using that cat in the box, that trick taking game that's just like, it's just like, every gamer should try that. I'm not a trick-taking game player, but like there's like these games that kind of like come like 404, Freedom Freeze, you know, where it's just like, you know, it's just a unique thing. It's just like a very, playing a lot of games and stuff, that's a unique thing. So I think like this is a game, I mean, if you're an aspiring designer, you got to try this thing, right? You got to see what this sort of culmination in our hobby is, you know, like where are we at here this year, you know, in 2025 playing these style of games. It's really, really interesting to see. Now, I should mention also about the complexity a little bit. It isn't an overly complex game while you're playing it. However, you know, you have to, anytime you got to read multiple rulebooks or consult multiple rulebooks, that's a lot. So, it does feel casual enough where I feel like, oh, certainly another player could play this, like a different, like non-gamers or intro gamers, whatever. But this is the kind of game where you look at, oh, well, I got to check this rule. You look in the one rulebook and then you're like, oh no, is it in the other rulebook? Because everybody has their own, you know, different rulebook. Like this is the farmers, there's 4 different people. However, you could give the farmer the least complex to someone that is the, you know, the least familiar with gaming and stuff. So there's kind of that, but there are multiple rule books. It does take a little bit. You got to read the first rule book, understand the game, then read the specific rule book to character you're going to play. Then you got to go back and maybe finer points. Then you play, and then you got to do. So there is kind of a lot to it. So again, anytime I feel like you have multiple rule books in a game, that is going to add some complexity. So, but as you're playing the game, it does not feel that complex. And again, I don't think it's as punishing like a legacy game. You make a mistake, that's, you know, you're gonna have to carry that with you for the rest of the game, and it's that really unique singular experience. So I think in that it might be a little bit frustrating, you know. But in this, I mean, like I said, it's like it doesn't matter. But does that take away from the game? I don't know. At this point, I'm very engaged. I'm very curious to see where it goes, and I'm really I'm really impressed with this. I really am very impressed. I'm impressed with the concept, the fact that it's brought together all these different mechanisms and things that have been popular over the years. And, you know, just looking at like this board, you know, like, I mean, like, yeah, like these pieces here, like, okay, well, that's for that, right? This is for this action. Well, but this, obviously, this comes out. So what's going to change here? You know, and there's nothing here. I want to see what happens. I mean, I haven't really looked at these envelopes. I have no idea how much you're going to get out of that, how much more there is. There's a huge stack of events. There's a lot to it. I mean, I'm for now, I'm like just playing. I've only played the farmer so far, which again, just first impressions. But I have all those other characters to try. You know, like I can try them. I could maybe, I don't know if I'm playing multiples on a solo thing. Very enjoyable solo, because I mean, this is kind of like a multiplayer solo. Very easy to play just by yourself. 2-player, I think fine. 4-player, you know, it seems like this might be perfect at every player count. I can't speak to those higher player counts, unfortunately, but yeah, some good player aids and stuff. You know, you've got some cards, you've got your book, of course, and you know, like again, if you follow the listing here in the day phases, I feel like you'll be okay. You can check those a little bit, but not too complex. I think maybe I spent a little too long on that complexity thing, but yeah. Okay, so I think wonderfully presented, incredible components, great idea, very fascinating, interesting kind of, you know, Frankenstein of, you know, various types of games, mechanisms, story elements, different kinds of popular things that we've seen in other games, a stellar production overall, just scratching the surface. I'm enjoying it. I'm very curious to see where it's going to go from here. But that's my first impressions. Hopefully that helps you to decide whether this game is something for you or not. I think if you're a board gamer, you should definitely, if you're an avid gamer, this is definitely something that that you should pick up and check out. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the game. If you want to see my overview, you can check the link back down below. I also have a playthrough up of the first season. So there are some light spoilers within that, but if you want to watch that just to kind of get a bit of an idea of that as well, you can do so. But for now, I gotta roll.